Adarniya Jain Sinha ji, Adarniya Professor Kanagas Sabapati ji, Adarniya Raj Balgaonkar ji, very senior dignitaries out here, my namaskaram and pranam to all of you. I want to thank Prabuddha Bharat for having younger voices as well among such an august audience so that we can voice our own sense of urgencies that we believe lie in the economy of the day. There is this sweet rule which is called the 65-35, that 65% population of India is below 35 years old. In politics, we don't have a commensurate amount of representation as per this formula, but nonetheless, we need to constantly nag our politicians and representatives to be mindful of the future of the Bharat and the kind of urgency with which they have to shape the future of Bharat. So with that level of urgency, I wanted to get a sense of what this event that we have put together, what are we trying to achieve out of this? And the theme, which is very rightfully and very carefully thought of, is how do you reclaim the lost glory of Bharat? Now, in order to achieve this quest for reclaiming the lost glory, we need to have certain metrics, certain goals, to constantly measure how well we are doing in order to achieve this goal. Now, while achieving this goal, there is a very easy thumb rule that in order to measure the prosperity and the well-being of the nation, of the society, gross domestic product, the GDP and GDP growth is a metric very carefully created by the Western economists and which has been the benchmark for measuring how well you are doing. But very cleverly, when the GDP growth rate numbers started falling for the Western economies and they started saturating it, they quickly changed metrics. And they brought in new metrics like Global Health Index, Global Happiness Index, Global Spiritual Index. So they have carefully defined and they kept changing the definition to suit their economic needs. The needs that serves well their own economy, their own nation, and their own goals that they have for their generations and their future generations. We have always been in a catching game. We still talk about the growth numbers in GDP terms, and we are constantly chasing them. But if we were to talk about happiness and satisfaction of life, etc., the equations, the charts, and everything will be flipped. India would be performing far better than the other GDP numbers, wherein growth-wise we do good, but per capita-wise we are not there anywhere in top 50, 60 top nations. So we need to definitely first understand what we are trying to gain here. What are we trying to achieve out of this brainstorming session? Now, there are a lot of economists in the West who have taught me is that unless and until India has a double-digit growth, you cannot effectively pull people out of the vicious circle of poverty in a permanent manner. The sheer number of poor people in this country who require economic emancipation is so huge. It is like a ticking bomb, a ticking demographic bomb, that unless you have a 10% plus growth rate, you cannot do anything. And GDP growth rate is a number which our politicians also have to quote every 5 years when they go to elections. And they are constantly tested around these metrics. We remember in 2014 also, when Prime Minister Modi ji came in, there was this expectation that there would be a double-digit growth. But then double-digit growth is not something that the government of the day alone can have a magic wand and then they can create a double-digit growth. It's a very difficult, complicated exercise, and it's not operating in a vacuum. There are these interconnected forces outside as well, which are constantly changing. And these are some of the things over which the current government of the day does not have control over. We see that there is a widespread protectionism led by the US, that whenever it suited them, they had these, they were the biggest champions of the world trade negotiations that were happening. They were the biggest champions of the Doha round of talks. But right now, when it is not suiting them, they've just kept it aside. They're focusing on protectionist attitude. They want to protect their economy, something that they have been blasting India for all of these years. But whenever it suits them, they go back, change the metrics, and then suit whatever works for them. And that is why being a superpower helps in all of these maneuvers. But we need to see that once a protectionist regime led by the US, reacted by China, and reacted by the other major economies in Europe, are going to create severe stress for Indian manufacturers and Indian service providers. Now, when we have grown our own capability to create products and create services for the world at large to sell them out, suddenly they have been acting so protectionist that is going to in turn have a severe impact in terms of overall exports, overall sending out these products out to the world markets. If you were to go by a classic textbook example of how do you reach this elusive double-digit growth story, net exports is a very important benchmark. Since India and all the other countries are not operating in a vacuum and they have to constantly trade with each other, we need to see that if we suddenly say that their exports are not going to eventually gain or allow us the kind of growth trajectory that China had for 15, 20 odd years, we will never be able to reach to the level of the double-digit growth. Another very serious thing is government spending. People think that the government will have these big-ticket infrastructure projects and they will spend all the money, and we will certainly have this stimulus injection in the economy, and that will have some artificial growth numbers. We also need to understand that this is not how things are going to work. India is a huge nation. How long can government have these stimulus packages and sustain an artificial growth number for us? That's also not possible. The only thing that is perhaps there is private consumption. Consumption of the economic goods within the country, and that has in itself very serious issues. First issue is enormous income inequality. We have poor, a tremendous group of a society which is poor, which cannot afford basic sustenance, and then on the other side you have the rich segment. If the consumption were to increase, what do rich people buy? Rich people buy luxury products. These are the products which are effectively imported from outside. That's not helping our economy. But if you see the poor, their habit of consumption and their nature of consumption has certain elements which eventually benefit the economy in terms of increasing the private consumption numbers and having positive feedback into the other loops as well. So this is where we are stuck right now, is this enormous income inequality and tremendous rural distress in general. It has less to do with politics. You know, we and especially the politics of the day and the media in general, attributes every single thing to the politics, to the politicians. At times, I personally believe that economics has such fundamental problems, fundamental issues, that any politician of the day cannot single-handedly come out and solve the issues. It is the society at large, the nation at large, which has to take the onus on its own to solve these problems, instead of constantly blaming or constantly externalizing our problem. That there is this person who is going to come riding on a horse and solve our problems. So I believe that in this setting, double-digit growth, double-digit GDP growth is a very important thing. But I personally am very skeptical that India is positioned to gain that in its near term. We haven't had 8% growth on a consecutive 3 to 4 years, barring somewhere around 2005, 6, 7. That happened primarily due to the good work that Atalji's government had done in the NDA 1. The benefits were reaped by Congress party, but nonetheless the nation gained, so it's no point like blaming each other. But then you see what happened after that. That was the only time when we were closest to the 10% and plus growth story. But we missed it out completely after that. There was the global financial meltdown happened. We were on a perfectly smooth trajectory thereafter, but in till 2010, we were able to hold on to the economy just because of the important wave that we were riding. But suddenly after that, you see how UPA 2 created a total collapse of the economy. People were in a constant state of exuberance, as if they believed that this growth story is going to go on its own, and we just have to reap the political benefits of this. But suddenly you see, our currency was hit, it started tumbling down, and the reaction that it had overall in the economy, the inflation numbers were very high, growth numbers were very less. Inflation was as high as 12%. It just taxed every amount of growth that the economy saw in the UPA 2 days. Our exports were down, our external balances were down. We were in a state of coma by 2014. And we all know that Fragile Five and all of these definitions which were thrusted upon us, suddenly the good growth story of India was brought down at a level where there was absolute hopelessness in Indian economy around 2014. And these are the fundamentals which we talk about. When I go on certain TV debates and represent the Indian economy, they say that you were shouting the same thing against Congress in 2013-14. Now the similar things are happening to you. How are you defending? But I tell them that there are certain fundamentals of the economy were so disturbingly bad in 2013 and 14 that you cannot compare with the fundamentals that are there today. It took Modi ji 4 years of constant amount of hard work to get this economy, which was lying in coma, in a complete state of paralysis, back on track. And it is not an easy thing, friends. I mean, when you understand an ailing economy, the investor sentiment is so low, nobody wants to even come to India. The FIIs had virtually completely moved back to the US, where the interest rates were rising. And we were stuck in a position where people were saying that in this BRICS acronym, I should be effectively dropped, that I, which is India, has no hope whatsoever. From that day, bringing the economy to this stage where you have one of the highest amount of foreign exchange with you, you have very well-controlled fiscal deficits, you have well-controlled currency, which for a very long time stayed steady. But yes, we all know that there were minor hiccups which happened due to external factors, but then you see the entire media exploded, just trying to put the entire blame on one regime, forgetting that there are certain external factors which will obviously change and reflect on certain macro numbers here and there. But understand the fundamentals. My professor, when she used to teach me, she was always at MIT, she taught me a few things that when you test, when a patient goes to a doctor, there are 4 or 5 tests that the doctor always recommends to understand the status, the health of the patient. There are such 5 basic thumb rules to test the health of our economy today. And all of these fundamentals, like having a strong, healthy fiscal deficit maintained throughout and having a discipline to maintain it, having good amount of external balances in place, having controlled inflation rate has been a 20-year historic low. And with that 20-year historic low inflation rates, the real growth rate starts mattering a lot. So we have put in these numbers due to a very able leadership at center. We have been able to put the right things in place. Now we are at 2018. A lot of these investors still believe that what will happen with these 3 state elections coming in, how are the markets going to react to the results. My suggestion to them, to most of these investors, is that no matter what happens in 1 or 2 elections, our economy, the robustness that has been created by certain policy measures which the government has taken, is so strong and so deep-rooted that you will be able to, the markets will be able to subside or go through all of these small political hiccups, so to say, in the near term and in the medium term as well. So this is the work that Prime Minister Modi has laid the foundation for. Now it is up to us, how do we reach where we've already reached is 8% growth, and how do we breach this 2-digit psychological barrier? And we get into that domain wherein our dreams of emancipating people in hordes, in millions and millions every year starts happening. So that's the single biggest challenge that I personally believe is there. There are a lot of very interesting things that are being done by the present government, which makes me very hopeful. As a young Indian, I always thought of the northeastern region as the Kendra Bindu of the Ashtalakshmi. In your northeast corner of your households, you set up mandir. It is the most pious corner of your house. You tend to worship that place. For 70 years, that entire thing was, that entire region was considered as a buffer zone. Buffer zone wherein all kinds of nefarious activities, drugs trade, illicit arms trade, insurgency, conversion, all of this was silently happening away from the gaze of this nation. Our friends couldn't even understand what are these different states, what their capital is, and they always find it hard to put it on the map. They are our part. Every inch of this soil our forefathers have fought for. And it was only Prime Minister Modi who came in and renewed this thrust. For a very long time, the politicians in the Northeast found it extremely hard that why is Delhi so concerned about us suddenly? For all of these years, they had an arm's length transactional relationship with the center. Center said that these are the regional satraps that we have created. They will manage their local Northeast politics on their own and not bother us. Handling the insurgency at your level without bothering us was the modus operandi of the Congress regime for the past 60, 70 years. When Prime Minister Modi came in, he said that Delhi is going to be an active stakeholder in your growth story. We will not leave your hands. We will not have that arm length distance between the two. We will hold your hands and then march forward together. So this Act East policy is a beautiful, a beautiful vision that Prime Minister Modi had, that we need to act East and we need to act fast. The kind of vision that he translated into actual actions is just so amazing. ASEAN region, we all know, is a tremendous economic growth story for a very long time. And their fundamentals have been much poorer than India's fundamentals throughout. But then it was this northeastern region, which was over the years kept in the dark, is suddenly coming to light. And the amount of economic activity that is coming in is just fabulous. The entire ASEAN region, for example, is getting connected to the Northeast and to mainland India through road. There are, through the Udan scheme, for example, Guwahati is connected to 6 different ASEAN countries, and I was making a presentation to the ASEAN investors. Suddenly, all of these investors are thinking that this is the region which has one of the most interesting arbitrage opportunities for investors to come in and look at. They believe that this region is surrounded by 6 different countries, can offer such exciting economic opportunities which nobody has even thought of. So what Prime Minister Modi has been doing is, he's been untapping these hidden potentials in our economy, which nobody even thought of. So when we go about a complete reorientation in our thinking, will we be able to reach newer growth trajectories, which so far, with the current thinking and the thought process, would not have been possible. So we all believe we are going into a very critical year, 2019, when we have to really understand the tremendous amount of effort that the current government has put into the foundations of this soil. Do not let the foundations and hand it over to people who will loot them again. So it's eventually the responsibility to all of you, and I do hope and I do wish that people whose heart beats for Bharat will be victorious, and the enemies of Bharat will be defeated. Thank you.